Hi, this is our first video on the topic of higher degree equations. I'm going to split this up into two videos. In this one, we're just going to focus on solving with the quadratic formula. This is an area that students sometimes have some trouble with, not understanding how to do it so much as doing it accurately. I'm going to give you some hints to avoid some common mistakes here in a minute, but let's review what the quadratic formula is. The quadratic formula allows you to solve a quadratic equation. You need to have your equation in a specific form in order to use this. So we want our x squared term, our x term, then our constant. And this is important. It must be equal to 0 in order to use the quadratic formula. So if you come across an equation that's not in the right order or it's not equal to 0, you're going to have to do a couple steps of algebra to get it into the right form. A is going to be the number in front of your x squared term, b in front of the x, c is going to be your constant. And it's important that you keep the correct signs on there. So if you see something that's got, a negative 2x plus 5, b is negative 2. So be conscious of your signs. The quadratic formula is shown right here. And it gives the solution to that equation. So it tells you what x would equal for that equation. And it actually gives you two solutions. There's two solutions because of this plus or minus here. Keep in mind that when you use that plus or minus, you're really representing two distinct answers, one version with a plus, one version with a minus. Some teachers make students write out both versions explicitly. I'm fine if you just use the plus or minus in my classroom. Let me give you a couple hints that will help you to avoid some common mistakes. This first one's pretty important. I have a calculator on hand when I'm doing these problems, but I do not rely on the calculator to simplify the inside of the radical. The reason is there's a very easy mistake you can use when you're typing it in, especially when b is negative. It's going to actually cause your calculator to spit out the wrong answer for that inside of the radical. So try and do it by hand as much as you can. Second hint here. When you do that b squared inside the radical, it's always going to be positive. If you think about it, squaring something, you're multiplying something by itself. If you multiply a positive number by itself, it turns out positive. If you multiply a negative number by itself, it turns out positive as well. So it's always going to be positive. Watch your signs. This comes up a lot. People make mistakes when they're simplifying the negative 4ac under the radical. Keep in mind that you've got a negative 4 there, and look at the signs on a and c, and decide what that sign is going to be before you actually start thinking about what the value is going to be. Once you get the inside of the radical simplified, make sure that you look to see if you can simplify the radical, if you can pull anything to the outside of the radical. And then at the end, you always want to check and see if you can simplify your fraction. Oftentimes you can factor something out of the numerator, the top of your fraction, and the bottom of your fraction, and those two things will cancel. We're actually going to see that in the first example that I'm about to do right now. So let's jump right into it here with some examples. So we've got a quadratic equation. This one's already in the correct form. We've got our squared term, then our linear term, and our constant, and it is already equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and note the values of a, b, and c. A is going to be 3. We've got a b value of negative 6, and c is going to be positive 1. All right, so we've got our quadratic formula written here just as a reminder. I'm going to go ahead and sort of write out the structure of the quadratic formula here, leaving parentheses where my values are going to go, and then I'm going to come back and fill in those values. Now, a lot of you are going to think it's a waste of your time to write those parentheses. However, I can tell you from experience that people who do this will make fewer mistakes than those who don't. So you choose your own path, but I highly recommend that you write out that form first. I think it just helps you to keep track of the signs a little bit better. Okay, let's start plugging some stuff in. First thing we want is b, so the opposite of b will be is negative 6. And then we got b squared here, and then minus 4ac, a is 3, c is 1, all over 2 times a, which is 3. Okay, now our job is just to simplify this. We've done the plugging in, now we just need to simplify. I got a minus negative 6, that's going to become a positive 6. Underneath, let's go ahead and square that negative 6. You square a negative, it's going to be positive. Let's look at our signs here for the negative 4 times 3 times 1. I got negative 4 times a couple positive numbers, so I do know my final answer is going to come out to be negative. Once I've got my sign, now I'm going to go back and look at my values. 4 times 3 times 1 would be 12. And again, I encourage you to think about the sign before you start thinking about the numbers. That'll help you keep you from making some very common mistakes. On the bottom there, we got a 2 and a positive 3, so that's going to be a positive 6 on the bottom. Let's take this a step further. Whoops, spoiler alert. Okay, 36 minus 12 is 24. And let's simplify that radical 24. There's something we can pull out of that. 24 is 4 times 6, so square root of 4 is 2 radical 6. Radical 24 turns into 2 radical 6. That's all over 6. So everything's simplified. However, I want to look at my fraction, see if I can cancel anything. Looking at the top and the bottom, I noticed that I could pull a factor of 2, out of both the top and the bottom, then I'd be able to cancel that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You do need to do this last step if you're planning on getting these problems correct on your quizzes. So I pulled a 2 out on the top, and I also turned that 6, I just called it 2 times 3, so essentially pulling a 2 out there as well. Now these 2's are both factors, so we can go ahead and cancel. And that leaves us with our final answer then, which is 3 plus or minus radical 6 all over 3. You may be tempted to cancel these 3's here, but we cannot. The reason is, the only time we can cancel is when we're canceling a factor of the numerator with a factor of the bottom, like we did in the 2's here. These were both factors. The 3 here is not a factor of the entire top, so we cannot cancel it. So this is going to be our final answer. All right, let's look at another equation here. Now this one's not in the right form, so we're going to have to do a little bit of work just to get it into the correct form. So I want to get all my k's on the left-hand side here. So I want a 0 on the right-hand side. So I'm going to get rid of this 4 here. This negative 4 will add to both sides. To get rid of that, let's get rid of this 6k here, minus 6k on both sides. All right, and that leaves us with the following equation. 4k squared plus 5k minus 5 equal to 0. And now we're in the correct form. We've got it equal to 0. Everything's in the correct order. So let's go ahead and write down our values for A, B, and C. All right, A is 4, positive 4. B is positive 5. And C is negative 5. So we'll be using those values to fill into our quadratic formula. As before, I'm going to start by writing out the structure of the quadratic formula, leaving parentheses where my values are going to go. And then I'll go ahead and plug in my values. All right, so the first spot there is B, which is 5. Second spot's also B. And we got A and C. A is 4. C is negative 5. I have to be careful with that sign. And then on the bottom there, we've got 2 times A, which is 4. All right, let's start simplifying this. So it is a negative out front here, negative 5 plus or minus square root. 5 squared is 25. And then I'm going to look at my signs here first. So I'm looking at this clump that's being multiplied together here. I got a positive and 2 negative values. Now the negative times the negative are going to cancel each other out, and we're going to multiply by a positive, so it's going to end up being positive. So I know that this is going to be a plus. I'll double check that, make sure my signs are correct. Yes, I have 2 negatives, so those will cancel. It's going to turn into a plus. Now I can just focus on the values. I've got 4 times 4 times 5. Which comes out to be, let's see here, 80. Okay. Pausing here because I feel like I've made a mistake. Just a moment. yeah, I don't know why, but I just had this feeling that I was making a mistake there. But I'm looking back over my work and I'm feeling pretty sound about it. So let's keep going. Maybe take this as sort of a teaching point. Yeah, it's really easy to make mistakes here, and I certainly have made my share of them. So when I start getting that feeling, I always stop and check my work. So, but yeah, I'm feeling good about this. Okay, so let's just keep going with this. -5 plus or minus the square root. We got 25 plus 80, which is going to give us 105 in here. It's 0. And that's still all over 8. So I got radical 105 in there, and I should probably try and split up 105, see if anything comes out of that. I know it's divisible by 5. That would be 5 times 21. 21 is 3 times 7, so I can't really group anything up. We don't have any perfect squares in there, so that's just going to have to stay how it is. Is there anything we can factor out to cancel on the top and bottom? The answer there is no, so this one's done then. Okay. Next up then, we've got another quadratic equation here, and it's not in the right form. It's almost. We just got to get that -2 off of that side. Let's add 2 to both sides. We should be in good shape. So 5x squared plus 3x plus 2 equal to 0. Okay, now it's in the correct form. Let's go ahead and mark our values for A, B, and C. A is 5, B is 3, and C is 2, and they're all positive this time. All right, go ahead and build our quadratic formula. Another reason that I like to put these parentheses in here is that I find if I have a task that I'm prone to making mistakes with, I can break it down into smaller chunks and just do one thing at a time. I can make fewer mistakes. So right now I'm thinking about the structure of it, making sure that I get the structure correct. Now my next step, I just need to plug in the values. The structure is already in place. It's less for my brain to think about at one time, and I find I make fewer mistakes that way. All right, let's go ahead and fill in our values now. B is 3, B is 3, A is 5, and another A down here, and C is 2. Okie doke. Time to simplify. So we do have a -3 sitting out in front. 3 squared is 9. Let's look at the signs. I got a -4 times a positive times a positive. That's going to be a negative. Multiplying that out is going to give me a 40 inside of there. On the bottom, we have a positive 10. All right. It looks like we are going to have an imaginary answer here. 9 minus 40 is -31 all over 10. Now, we never leave negatives inside of the square root. We are going to pull that out and call that I. That's the imaginary number. Okay, so that negative moves to the outside and becomes an I, lowercase I. All right, 31 is prime, so we're not going to be able to pull anything else out of that radical. I'm looking at the top and the bottom to see if there's anything we can factor out of both that we may be able to cancel, and I don't see anything, so that's going to be our final answer here. So there's 3 examples for you. Again, just go very slowly and methodically, especially at first, because in the past I've had a lot of students get very frustrated that they were getting these problems wrong, and I think the main reason was they were trying to do too many steps at one time, trying to hold too much information in their heads at one time. If you have to write out 5 steps to get it done like I have, then write them out and get it right the first time. All right, thanks for your attention.